He thought his wealth was a shield, a golden ticket that allowed him to treat the world like his personal playground. Damon Sterling, a man whose net worth could buy small countries, sat in the most exclusive booth of New York's The Gilded Spoon, laughing as he humiliated a trembling waitress. He looked her up and down, turned to his wealthy business partners, and switched to Arabic, a language he was sure this poor, exhausted girl wouldn't understand. He called her dirt beneath his shoe, a peasant fit only to serve. He smirked, waiting for his friends to laugh. But the laughter never came, because the waitress didn't cry. She didn't run. She straightened her back, looked him dead in the eye, and responded in flawless, elegant Arabic. The color drained from Damon's face. He had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and he had no idea that this peasant held a secret that could destroy his entire empire. Sarah Jenkins checked her reflection in the stainless steel siding of the industrial coffee machine. Dark circles, purple and bruised-looking, sat heavy under her eyes. She hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night in 3 weeks. The rent for her studio apartment in Queens was 2 weeks late, and her landlord, Mr. Kowalski, had stopped leaving polite notes and started leaving aggressive voicemails. "Table 4 needs sparkling water, Sarah. Move it." The sharp voice of Henri, the floor manager, snapped her back to reality. Henri was a small man with a thin mustache who treated the waitstaff of the Gilded Spoon not like employees, but like indentured servants. He knew they needed the tips. He knew that in this economy, a job at one of Manhattan's top 3 restaurants was a lifeline, even if the clientele made you want to scream. Sarah grabbed the bottle of San Pellegrino, her wrist aching. She had once dreamed of being a diplomat. She had spent her childhood traveling the world, absorbing cultures, learning languages like other children learned nursery rhymes. But life had a way of humbling you. After her father's sudden death and the seizure of his assets due to a political scandal that wasn't his fault, Sarah found herself alone in New York at 22, with no money, a disgraced family name, and a resume that intimidated entry-level bosses and was too thin for the corporate world. "Coming, Henri," she said, her voice steady. She never let them see her sweat. That was the rule. The restaurant was buzzing tonight. It was a Friday, which meant the Wall Street crowd was out in full force. The air smelled of truffle oil, expensive cologne, and arrogance. Men in $5,000 suits laughed too loudly, while women in dresses that cost more than Sarah's annual salary picked at salads they wouldn't eat. Sarah navigated the floor with the grace of a dancer. She had to. One slip, one dropped fork, and she could be fired. Henri was looking for a reason to cut staff before the slow season. "Sarah," a hushed voice whispered near the kitchen doors. It was Chloe, another waitress, and the closest thing Sarah had to a friend here. Chloe looked terrified. "Have you seen the reservation list for the VIP booth?" Sarah paused, wiping a smudge from a wine glass. "No, why? Who is it? A senator? A Kardashian?" Chloe shook her head, her eyes wide. Worse, Damon Sterling. Sarah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Everyone knew Damon Sterling. He was the CEO of Sterling Dynamics, a tech and defense contractor conglomerate. He was 32, devastatingly handsome, and rumored to be one of the cruelest men in business. He was known for hostile takeovers, stripping companies for parts, and firing thousands of employees without blinking. He was also known for terrorizing service staff. There were stories on Reddit threads about him, throwing wine at a bartender in London and tipping a valet with a single penny in Miami. "Great," Sarah sighed, tucking a stray lock of brown hair behind her ear. "Who has the table?" Chloe grimaced. "You do. Henry assigned it specifically. He said you have the poise to handle him. But I think he just wants to see if you'll break." Sarah looked across the dining room toward the VIP booth, a semi-private alcove raised slightly above the rest of the floor, draped in velvet curtains. It was empty, waiting like a throne for a tyrant. "I can handle him," Sarah said, though she didn't feel it. "He's just a man, Chloe. He eats, he sleeps, he breathes. His money doesn't make him a god." "Maybe," Chloe whispered, "but his money can get you blacklisted from every restaurant in the city. Just be careful. Don't look him in the eye too much, and whatever you do, don't speak unless spoken to." At 8:15 p.m., the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. The heavy oak doors swung open, and the noise level dropped by half. Damon Sterling walked in. He looked exactly like his pictures in Forbes, perhaps even sharper. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, a black dress shirt unbuttoned at the top, and a watch that glinted under the low lights. A Patek Philippe, likely worth $250,000. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by 3 other men, 2 older, heavy-set men who looked like oil tycoons, and a younger, nervous-looking man holding a briefcase. Henry practically ran to the entrance, bowing so low it looked painful. "Mr. Sterling, what an honor. Your table is ready, the finest spot in the house, as requested." Damon didn't even look at Henri. He just handed his coat to the hostess without breaking his stride. "We need privacy, Henri, and bring the 82 Waitress immediately. I'm celebrating a merger." "Of course, sir. Right away." Henri snapped his fingers at Sarah, his eyes pleading and threatening at the same time. "Go." Sarah took a deep breath. She smoothed her apron. She picked up the heavy leather-bound wine list and the menus. She walked toward the VIP booth, her heart hammering against her ribs. She told herself it would be fine. She had lived in Cairo. She had lived in Paris. She had navigated diplomatic dinners with her father, where one wrong word could start a war. She could handle a spoiled billionaire. She was wrong. As Sarah approached the booth, the smell of expensive cigars and heavy musk hung in the air, even though smoking was strictly prohibited. Rules, apparently, did not apply to Damon Sterling. Damon was seated at the head of the table, leaning back, his legs sprawled out. The other men were laughing at something he had just said. "Gentlemen," Sarah said, her voice projecting a professional calm. "Welcome to the Gilded Spoon. My name is Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you this evening." Damon didn't look up. He continued scrolling on his phone. The 2 older men, introduced later as Mr. Farouk and Mr. Al-Hassan, glanced at her dismissively. "Water," Damon said, still looking at his screen. "Sparkling, no ice, and bread. Why is there no bread on this table?" "I will bring it right away, sir," Sarah said. "Don't just say it. Do it!" Damon snapped, finally looking up. His eyes were ice blue, cold and piercing. "And make sure the bread is warm. If it's cold, I'm sending it back, and I'm taking it out of your tip. Assuming you get one?" Sarah's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Understood." For the next hour, Sarah ran a marathon. She brought the wine, the bread, warming it twice just to be sure, the appetizers, and the entrees. Nothing was ever right. The steak was too pedestrian, the soup was lukewarm, the lighting was too bright. Damon complained about everything, snapping his fingers at her whenever he wanted a refill. Sarah took it all. She needed the money. She needed to pay Mr. Kowalski tomorrow, or she'd be on the street. She shut off her pride and became a machine. "Yes, sir." "No, sir." "Right away, sir." By the time the main course was cleared, the table was in high spirits, mostly due to the 3 bottles of wine they had consumed. The conversation shifted to business. Sarah approached to clear the plates, moving silently. Damon leaned in toward Mr. Farouk and Mr. Al-Hassan. The younger man with the briefcase was typing furiously on a tablet. "The deal is practically done," Damon said in English, swirling his wine. "The acquisition of the Dubai port logistics firm. We're going to gut it, of course." Mr. Farouk looked concerned. "But the workers, Damon. There are thousands. The agreement stated we would keep the workforce." Damon laughed, a cruel, dry sound. "Agreements are paper, Farouk. Once we own the controlling stake, we own the rules. We fire the local management, bring in automation, and cut the labor costs by 40%. The stock will jump 10 points overnight." Sarah froze for a microsecond as she reached for a plate. She knew that port. Her father had worked on trade deals there. It was the lifeblood of that region. Damon was talking about destroying the livelihoods of thousands of families just to boost a stock price. She caught herself and continued clearing the table. But Damon noticed the hesitation. He looked at her with a sneer. He was drunk on power and wine. He turned to Mr. Farouk and Mr. Al-Hassan, a wicked glint in his eye. He decided to switch languages, assuming the privacy of a foreign tongue would allow him to be even more candid and cruel. He spoke in Arabic. Not the formal Arabic used in news broadcasts, but a rough, street dialect he must have picked up during his business travels. "Look at her," Damon said in Arabic, gesturing lazily towards Sarah with his wine glass, "hovering like a vulture. Do you think she has any idea what we are discussing?" Mr. Al-Hassan chuckled nervously, also in Arabic. "She is just doing her job, Damon. Leave the girl alone." "Her job?" Damon scoffed in Arabic, his voice dripping with venom. "This isn't a job. This is servitude. Look at her hands. Rough. Look at her shoes. Cheap rubber. She is a peasant. Dirt beneath my shoe." Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she stacked the plates. Her heart began to pound in her ears, louder than the restaurant noise. Dirt beneath his shoe. Damon wasn't finished. He wanted to show off for his partners. He wanted to prove that he was the alpha in the room, the man who could say anything, do anything, and get away with it. He leaned closer to Sarah, smiling as if he were about to give her a compliment. But he spoke in Arabic again. "You are pathetic," he said, the guttural sounds rolling off his tongue. "You probably think you're pretty, don't you? Hoping one of us will take you home? I wouldn't let you clean my bathroom, let alone warm my bed. You are invisible. You are nothing." He laughed, and this time the other men laughed too, uneasily, but they laughed. They were wealthy men, and they followed the money. Damon was the money. Damon switched back to English, grinning at Sarah. "What's the matter, sweetheart? Cat got your tongue, or are you just slow?" The restaurant seemed to go silent for Sarah. The clinking of silverware, the jazz music, the chatter, it all faded into a white hum. She looked at Damon. She saw the arrogance in his eyes. She saw the belief that he was untouchable. She thought about her rent. She thought about her empty bank account. She thought about the fear of being homeless. But then she thought about her father. She thought about the nights in Cairo, sitting on the balcony, reading poetry in Arabic, learning the beauty of the language, the respect it commanded. She thought about the dignity she had fought so hard to keep after losing everything. She put the stack of plates down on the serving tray stand. The clatter was loud enough to make Damon pause. She turned to him. She didn't look at the floor. She didn't look at his chin. She looked him directly in the eyes, her gaze burning with a fire that startled him. "Is there something wrong?" Damon asked, his brow furrowing. Sarah took a breath. She opened her mouth, and she didn't speak English. The silence that hung between Sarah and the billionaire was heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the hairs on Sarah's arms stand up. Damon was still grinning, his glass raised halfway to his mouth, waiting for her to retreat into submission, waiting for the confused, terrified look of a peasant who knew she was being mocked but didn't know the words. Sarah straightened her spine. The ache in her feet vanished. The fear of Mr. Kowalski and the overdue rent evaporated. In that moment, she was not Sarah the waitress. She was Sarah, the daughter of a man who had taught her that language was the only weapon you could carry across any border. She looked at Mr. Farouk, then at Mr. Al-Hassan, acknowledging them with a nod of respect that was far too regal for her uniform. Then she locked eyes with Damon. When she spoke, her voice was not the polite, subservient whisper she had used all night. It was rich, resonant, and commanded the space. And it was in perfect, classical Arabic, far more refined and educated than the street slang Damon had clumsily used. "Mr. Sterling," she began, the syllables flowing like water over stone, "you speak of dirt beneath your shoes, but you forget that the dirt is what holds the foundation of your palaces. Without the dirt, you have nowhere to stand." Damon's hand jerked. Wine sloshed over the rim of his glass, staining the white tablecloth blood red. His smile didn't just fade, it shattered. His eyes widened, pupils contracting, as his brain struggled to process the impossibility of the moment. Sarah didn't stop. She turned her gaze to Mr. Farouk, whose jaw had literally dropped. "And regarding the Dubai acquisition, sir," she continued in Arabic, her tone shifting to one of professional concern, the kind a diplomat uses to avert a crisis. "Mr. Sterling believes that agreements are merely paper. He intends to fire the management and replace the local workers with automation to inflate the stock price. He calls it gutting the company. I believe the term he used was that he would strip it for parts. I thought you should know the true nature of his handshake before you sign anything." The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't just the table. The tables nearby, sensing the sudden shift in energy, had quieted down. Damon looked like he had been struck by lightning. His face turned a shade of pale that made his expensive tan look sickly. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was a man who controlled billions of dollars, a man who moved markets with a tweet. But in this specific second, he was powerless. He had been stripped naked in front of the very people he needed to impress. Mr. Al-Hassan was the first to react. He looked at Damon, his expression shifting from amusement to cold, hard scrutiny. "Damon," he said in English, his voice devoid of the warmth it held minutes ago, "is this true? Is this what you said?" Damon scrambled. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by a frantic, sweaty desperation. No, of course not. She's lying. She's crazy." He pointed a shaking finger at Sarah. "She doesn't know what she's talking about. She probably used Google Translate or something." Sarah smiled, a sad, knowing smile. She switched back to English, her diction crisp and clear. "Google Translate cannot teach dialect, Mr. Sterling, and it certainly cannot teach the manners you so clearly lack. I lived in Cairo for 6 years. My father was the attaché to the consulate. I speak 4 languages. You, it seems, struggle to be decent in even one." Damon stood up so abruptly, his chair screeched backward and toppled over. The sound echoed through the gilded spoon like a gunshot. "You little witch!" Damon roared, his face flushing a deep, angry crimson. The veneer of the sophisticated businessman was gone. Now, he was just a bully who had been punched in the nose. "Who do you think you are? You're a nobody. You're a waitress." "I am a human being," Sarah said, not backing down an inch, though her heart was thumping so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs. "And I will not be insulted. Not for a tip. Not for this job." "This job?" Damon let out a hysterical laugh. He turned wildly, scanning the room until he spotted Henri, who was frozen near the hostess stand, looking as if he were watching a car crash in slow motion. "Manager, get over here, now!" Henry sprinted over, his face pale, sweat beading on his upper lip. "Mr. Sterling, sir, I am so sorry, Fire her!" Damon screamed, pointing at Sarah. Spit flew from his mouth. "I want her gone. I want her out on the street right now. She insulted me. She threatened me. She assaulted me." "Assaulted?" Sarah repeated, incredulous. "I haven't touched you." "She assaulted my character," Damon shouted, grabbing Henri by the lapels of his jacket. "If she isn't fired in the next 30 seconds, I will buy this building and evict you. I will sue this restaurant into oblivion. I will make sure none of you ever work in this city again. Do you hear me?" Henry trembled. He looked at Sarah. There was apology in his eyes, but it was weak. It was the look of a coward who was choosing survival over justice. "Sarah," Henri whispered, his voice shaking. "Give me your apron." "Henri, you can't be serious." Chloe's voice piped up from a few tables away, but Henri shot her a look that silenced her. "Now, Sarah," Henri said, louder this time. "You're fired. Get out." Sarah looked at Henry. She looked at the spilled wine. She looked at Damon, who was panting, his chest heaving, a triumphant sneer slowly returning to his face as he realized he still held the ultimate card. Power. Slowly, deliberately, Sarah reached behind her back and untied her apron. She folded it neatly. She placed it on the table, right next to the puddle of Petrus 82. "You don't need to fire me, Henri," Sarah said quietly. "I wouldn't work for a place that allows its staff to be treated like animals." She turned to Damon one last time. He was fixing his cufflinks, trying to regain his composure, trying to look like the victor. "You may have the money, Mr. Sterling," Sarah said, her voice carrying to the surrounding tables. "But you are the poorest man I have ever met." She turned on her heel and walked away. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She walked through the dining room, past the staring faces of the Wall Street elite, past the shocked hostess, and out the heavy oak doors into the cool New York night. The adrenaline that had carried Sarah out of the restaurant lasted exactly 2 blocks. As she turned the corner onto Fifth Avenue, the rage and the righteous indignation suddenly crashed, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. Her knees buckled, and she had to lean against the cold stone facade of a bank to keep from falling. She was fired. The thought hit her like a physical blow. She was fired. No paycheck on Friday. No tips tonight. She had exactly $42 in her bank account and $12 in her pocket. Mr. Kowalski was going to evict her. She had nowhere to go. "Stupid," she whispered to herself, pressing her forehead against the rough stone. "Stupid, stupid pride." Why couldn't she have just stayed silent? Why did she have to speak up? She could have just taken the insults, taken the abuse, and taken the money. That's what people did to survive, wasn't it? They swallowed their pride. Damon Sterling was right. She was a nobody. And now she was a jobless nobody. She began to walk toward the subway, her feet dragging. The city, usually so full of promise, felt hostile now. The lights of the skyscrapers weren't stars. They were just electricity she couldn't afford. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. It was a text from Chloe. "Chloe, OMG Sarah." That was legendary. "But Henry is freaking out. He's already blacklisting you in the system. I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" Sarah didn't reply. She couldn't. She swiped her Metro card at the turnstile. Insufficient funds. She stared at the screen, tears finally blurring her vision. She had used the last of the balance to get to work. She had expected to reload it with her cash tips from tonight, but she had walked out before cashing out. She had to walk home, 7 miles to Queens, in her waitressing shoes. It took her 3 hours. By the time she reached her building, her blisters had blisters. The neighborhood was quiet, the street lights flickering. She climbed the 4 flights of stairs to her apartment, praying that her key would still work, that Mr. Kowalski hadn't changed the locks yet. The key turned. She pushed the door open. Relief washed over her, followed immediately by dread. A red envelope was taped to the inside of the door. Final notice, it read in bold black letters. Payment due in 24 hours or eviction proceedings begin. Sarah slid down the door until she hit the floor. She hugged her knees to her chest. She was 22 years old, educated, trilingual, and hard-working, and she was completely broken. She sat there for a long time, staring at the peeling paint on the opposite wall. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since before her shift started at 4 p.m. She closed her eyes and replayed the scene in the restaurant. The look on Damon's face. The shock of the partners. Wait. The partners! Sarah's eyes snapped open. The adrenaline sparked again, just a flicker. She remembered what she had said. She remembered what Damon had said. The Dubai port deal, the layoffs, the deception. Damon Sterling hadn't just been insulting her. He had been bragging about fraud. He had explicitly told his partners one thing while planning to do the exact opposite. That wasn't just unethical. Depending on the contracts involved, it could be a massive breach of trust. Perhaps even illegal if he had filed false intent documents. But who would believe her? She was a fired waitress. He was a billionaire. It was her word against his, and his word was backed by an army of lawyers. She stood up and walked to her tiny kitchenette. She poured herself a glass of tap water. As she drank, her mind raced. Damon had been terrified. That was the key. He hadn't just been angry that she spoke back. He had been scared. He had scrambled to deny it. She's lying. She's crazy. Why panic if it didn't matter? Sarah walked over to her small desk, where her old, battered laptop sat. She opened it and waited for the slow start-up screen. She connected to the neighbor's unsecured Wi-Fi she sometimes borrowed. She typed, "Sterling Dynamics Dubai Port Deal," into the search bar. Hundreds of articles popped up. It was big news. Sterling Dynamics poised to acquire majority stake in Al Fayed Logistics. Deal hailed as a partnership for growth. Damon Sterling promises seamless integration and job security for the region. There was a video clip of Damon from a press conference 2 days ago. Sarah clicked play. Damon stood at a podium, looking charismatic and trustworthy. "We are not just buying a company," he told the reporters. "We are investing in people. I have given my personal word to the board of Al Fayed Logistics that we will protect the workforce. This is about building the future together." Sarah paused the video. Her heart was racing again. "He lied," she whispered. "He lied on camera. He lied to the shareholders. And tonight, he admitted it." But proof? She had no recording. She had no documents. She had nothing but her memory of a conversation in a dialect most Americans didn't speak. She slumped back in her chair. It was hopeless. Even if she told someone, who would listen? The newspapers. They wouldn't run a story based on hearsay from a disgruntled ex-employee. She was about to close the laptop when her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Sarah stared at it. It was 1:00 a.m. Who would be calling her? She picked it up hesitantly. "Hello? Is this Sarah Jenkins?" A male voice. Deep, accented, but polite. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Omar," the voice said. "I am the personal assistant to Mr. Farouk Al Fayed." Sarah stopped breathing. Mr. Farouk, the older man at the table. The man who had looked horrified when Sarah translated Damon's words. "Mr. Al Fayed would like to speak with you," Omar continued. Tonight. Immediately. I'm at home in Queens, Sarah stammered. A car is outside your building, Miss Jenkins, Omar said. A black Mercedes. Please come down. It is a matter of utmost urgency. Mr. Al-Fayed believes you may be the only person who can save his family's legacy. Sarah walked to her window and pulled back the cheap curtain. Down on the street, amidst the beat-up Hondas and overflowing trash cans, sat a sleek, black limousine, its engine idling softly. Sarah looked at the eviction notice on her door. Then she looked at the car. She had lost her job. She was about to lose her home. She had nothing left to lose. I'm coming down, she said. The interior of the Mercedes was a world away from the gritty pavement of Queens. The seats were made of cream-colored leather that smelled of vanilla and new money. The windows were tinted so heavily that the passing streetlights were nothing more than dim, orange streaks. Sarah sat stiffly in the back, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. Omar, the assistant, sat in the front passenger seat, silent as a grave. The driver navigated the potholes of the Long Island Expressway with a smoothness that defied physics. As the car crossed the Queensboro Bridge, the skyline of Manhattan rose up like a fortress of glass and steel. Somewhere in one of those towers, Damon Sterling was likely sleeping soundly, confident that he had crushed another insect. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, her voice small in the quiet cabin. "The Plaza Hotel," Omar said, not turning around. "Mr. Al-Fayed has the royal suite. He is waiting for you." 20 minutes later, Sarah was being escorted through the gold-leafed lobby of the plaza. She felt painfully out of place in her worn-out sneakers and jeans, her hair tied back in a messy bun. The night staff looked at her with suspicion, but one nod from Omar, and they melted away. They took a private elevator to the penthouse floor. The doors opened directly into a living room that was larger than Sarah's entire apartment building. A fire crackled in a marble fireplace. Mr. Farouk stood by the window, looking out at Central Park. He was still wearing his suit from dinner, though his tie was loosened. Mr. Al-Hassan sat on a velvet sofa, his head in his hands. When Sarah entered, Mr. Farouk turned. His expression was grave, his eyes tired. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, walking toward her with his hand extended. "Thank you for coming. I apologize for the hour, and I apologize for the circumstances of our meeting earlier." Sarah hesitated, then shook his hand. It was warm and firm. "Mr. Al-Fayed, I admit I'm confused. An hour ago I was fired because of you. Now I'm in your penthouse. You were fired because Damon Sterling is a petulant child with too much power," Farouk corrected gently. "And you are here because you heard something that could save my family from ruin." He gestured for her to sit. Omar poured tea from a silver pot. "Please," Farouk said, sitting opposite her. "I need you to be precise. At the restaurant, you said Damon planned to strip the company for parts. You said he planned to fire the workforce. Did he use those exact words?" Sarah took a sip of the tea. It was Earl Grey, hot and calming. She closed her eyes, transporting herself back to the noise and clatter of the gilded spoon. She replayed the sounds, filtering out the jazz music and the clinking forks, focusing on Damon's voice. He was speaking in a dialect common to the Gulf, but with an American accent, Sarah began, her diplomat's training kicking in. He said, "Agreements are paper. Once we own the controlling stake, we own the rules." Mr. Al-Hassan looked up, his face pale. Sarah continued. He said, "We fire the local management, bring in automation, and cut the labor costs by 40%. Then he laughed. He said the stock would jump 10 points. He mocked your concern for the workers, Mr. Farouk. He called it sentimental. Farouk slammed his hand down on the coffee table, making the china rattle. "The snake!" he shouted, switching briefly to Arabic before composing himself. "I knew it. I felt it in my gut, but the lawyers said the contract was solid." "The contract?" Sarah asked. "We are selling 60% of Al-Fayed Logistics to Sterling Dynamics," Mr. Al-Hassan explained, his voice shaky. "It is a family business. My grandfather started it with one truck, but the market is changing. We need capital to upgrade. Damon promised us to our faces, that the soul of the company would remain. The contract has a clause for good faith management. But if his intent before signing is to dismantle the workforce, that is fraud. That creates a legal loophole to void the deal." "But you have signed?" Sarah asked. "Not yet," Farouk said, his eyes narrowing. "The final signing ceremony is tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. at the Sterling Dynamics headquarters. The press will be there. The board will be there." "Then don't sign," Sarah said simply. "It is not that simple," Farouk sighed. "If we walk away without cause, we owe a breakup fee of $50 million. It is in the preliminary agreement. We need proof. We need him to admit that he is lying, or we need a witness who can testify to his intent to defraud." He looked at Sarah. The weight of his gaze was heavy. "You are that witness, Miss Jenkins." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Me? I'm a waitress, a fired waitress. Damon's lawyers will destroy me. They'll say I'm disgruntled. They'll say I'm making it up for money. Who will a judge believe? The billionaire philanthropist or the girl who couldn't pay her rent?" Farouk stood up and walked to a desk. He picked up a checkbook. He wrote something quickly and tore off the page. He slid it across the table to Sarah. She looked at it. It was a check for $50,000. "I don't want your money," Sarah said, pushing it back. "I'm not a mercenary." "It is not a bribe," Farouk said softly. "It is a retainer. I want to hire you." "Hire me as what?" "As my consultant," Farouk said. "Tomorrow morning, I am not walking into that boardroom alone. I am taking you with me." Sarah laughed, a short, disbelief-filled sound. "You want me to walk into Sterling Dynamics? Damon will have security throw me out before I get through the lobby." "No, he won't," Farouk said, a dangerous glint appearing in his eyes. "Because you won't be Sarah the waitress. You will be Sarah Jenkins, my new chief strategy liaison. You will be part of the Al-Fayed delegation. If he refuses you entry, he refuses the deal. And he wants this deal too much to let his ego get in the way." "But what's the plan?" Sarah asked. "I stand there and glare at him." "No," Farouk said. "We wear a wire. You provoke him. You speak to him in Arabic. You make him lose his temper again. You make him say it again, on the record, in front of witnesses who aren't on his payroll." Sarah looked at the check. She looked at the fire. She thought about the dirt beneath his shoe comment. She thought about the thousands of workers in Dubai who were about to lose their livelihoods so Damon could buy another Patek Philippe watch. She wasn't just fighting for her rent anymore. She was fighting for respect. "I'll do it," Sarah said. "But on one condition." "Anything," Farouk said. "If we pull this off," Sarah said, "you help me get my family's name back. My father was innocent. I want to clear his record." Farouk smiled. "Ms. Jenkins, if we pull this off, I will hire the best legal team in Washington for you. We have a deal?" Sarah stood up and shook his hand. "We have a deal." The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Sterling Dynamics tower, turning the building into a blinding pillar of light. It was a monument to excess, standing 50 stories tall in the heart of the financial district. At 9:45 a.m., A convoy of black SUVs pulled up to the main entrance. Paparazzi and business reporters were already swarming, cameras flashing as they waited for the merger of the decade. Sarah sat in the second car, her hands resting on her lap. She looked different. Gone was the messy bun and the waitress uniform. At 6 a.m., a stylist hired by Farouk had arrived at the hotel. Sarah now wore a tailored navy blue power suit that cost more than her car would have if she had one. Her hair was blown out in sleek, professional waves. Her makeup was sharp, highlighting her eyes and giving her a look of fierce intelligence. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a shark. "Are you ready?" Farouk asked, sitting beside her. He tapped the lapel of his jacket, indicating the small, high-fidelity microphone hidden there. "I'm ready," Sarah said. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her voice was steady. She remembered her father's advice before big diplomatic summits. Fear is just fuel. Burn it. They stepped out of the car. The cameras flashed blindingly. Reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Al-Fayed, is the deal done? Are you excited to join the Sterling family?" Farouk waved them off, guiding Sarah through the revolving doors. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and waterfalls. Security guards in earpieces lined the walls. They approached the private elevators. A young assistant with a clipboard was waiting, looking flustered. "Mr. Al-Fayed, welcome. Mr. Sterling is waiting in the boardroom on the 50th floor. If I could just get the names of your party for security badges." "Farouk Al-Fayed," Farouk said. "Mustafa Al-Hassan. And this is Ms. Sarah Jenkins, our Chief of Strategy." The assistant paused, checking her list. I don't have a Ms. Jenkins on the list, sir. Mr. Sterling was very specific about the attendee list." "Ms. Jenkins is essential to the closing," Farouk said, his voice dropping an octave. "No Ms. Jenkins, no signature." The assistant paled. Of course, sir. I'll override it." She quickly printed a badge. They rode the elevator in silence. The numbers ticked up. 20, 30, 40, 50. The doors slid open. The boardroom was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the harbor. A massive mahogany table sat in the center. At one end sat Damon Sterling, flanked by his army of lawyers and advisors. Damon looked fresh, rested, and victorious. He stood up as they entered, flashing his $1,000,000 smile. "Farouk, Mustafa," Damon boomed, spreading his arms. "Welcome, welcome. Today is a historic day." He walked around the table to shake their hands. He was so focused on the partners that he didn't even look at the woman standing slightly behind them. To him, she was just another suit, another faceless advisor. "Damon," Farouk said, shaking his hand briefly, "we are ready to proceed. But first, there are some final clarifications we need regarding the implementation strategy." Damon laughed, waving a hand dismissively. "Clarifications? Farouk, the lawyers have been over this for months. It's a standard integration. But fine. Let's sit. Let's get this over with so we can pop the champagne." Damon returned to his seat at the head of the table. Farouk and Mustafa sat on the left. Sarah remained standing for a moment. "Who is this?" Damon asked, finally glancing at Sarah, his eyes squinting slightly. "I thought it was just the principals today." Sarah stepped forward. She placed her leather portfolio on the table. She looked Damon dead in the eye. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," she said, in clear, perfect English. Damon froze. The smile didn't leave his face instantly. It curdled. He blinked. He tilted his head. He recognized the voice. He recognized the eyes. But the context was so wrong, his brain refused to accept it. Do I know you?" Damon asked, his voice losing some of its boom. "We met last night," Sarah said, pulling out a chair and sitting down with deliberate slowness. At the Gilded Spoon. I believe you ordered the Waitress 82. The room went dead silent. The lawyers looked back and forth between Damon and Sarah. Damon's face went white, then red. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "You," he whispered. Then he looked at Farouk, his shock turning to fury. "Is this a joke? Farouk, why is the help sitting at my negotiation table?" "Ms. Jenkins is not the help," Farouk said calmly. "She is my advisor. She is here to ensure that the translation of our agreement is accurate." "She's a waitress," Damon shouted, pointing a finger at her. "Security, get in here." Two large guards stepped forward from the corners of the room. "If you remove her," Farouk said, his voice cutting through the air like a whip, "we walk out. The deal is dead. And I will hold a press conference in your lobby explaining exactly why." Damon hesitated. He looked at the guards. He looked at the clock. The press was waiting downstairs. The stock was already trading up in anticipation. If the deal fell through now, Sterling Dynamics stock would crash. He was leveraged to the hilt for this acquisition. He needed this. He waved the guards back. He sat down slowly, his eyes fixed on Sarah with pure hatred. "Fine," Damon hissed. "Play your games." But she doesn't speak. She sits there and shuts up. "Actually," Sarah said, opening her portfolio, "I have a few questions regarding the labor force retention clauses." Damon let out a sharp, incredulous breath. "You have questions? You?" "Yes," Sarah said. She switched seamlessly to Arabic. "You see, Mr. Sterling, my client is concerned about your comments last night regarding the gutting of the company." Damon flinched. The Arabic was a trigger. It reminded him of his vulnerability. "Speak English," Damon snapped. "We are in America." "As you wish," Sarah said. "Mr. Sterling, Clause 14b states that Sterling Dynamics will make every reasonable effort to maintain current staffing levels for a period of 24 months. Is that correct?" "Yes. It's standard boilerplate," Damon grunted, checking his watch. "Last night," Sarah continued, her voice raising slightly to ensure the microphone on Farouk's lapel caught every word. "You told your associates that this clause was paper. You stated your intention to fire the management immediately and automate the port. You said the workers were peasants and that you would strip the company for parts." The lawyers on Damon's side stiffened. One of them leaned in and whispered urgently to Damon. Damon's eyes darted around the room. He realized he was being cornered, but his arrogance was his fatal flaw. He couldn't believe that a waitress could outsmart him. He thought he could bully his way out. "I was drunk," Damon lied, leaning forward with a sneer. "It was locker room talk. It means nothing. The contract is what matters." "So you intend to honor the contract?" Sarah pressed. "You intend to keep the workers?" "I intend to make money," Damon snapped. "That's my job, and if I have to trim some fat to do it, I will." "Trimming fat is different from gutting a company," Farouk interjected. "Damon, look me in the eye. Do you promise, on your honor, that no mass layoffs are planned for the first year?" Damon slammed his fist on the table. "My honor? You question my honor because of what this servant told you?" He looked at Sarah, his face twisted with disdain. "You think you're smart, don't you?" Damon spat. "You think because you speak a few languages you belong in this room. You're nothing. You're a tray carrier, a minimum wage nobody." Sarah didn't flinch. "Answer the question, Mr. Sterling. Are the layoffs planned?" Damon lost it. The pressure, the lack of sleep, the insult of having a waitress interrogate him. It broke his composure. "Yes," Damon shouted. "Yes, they're planned. Of course they're planned. Do you think I'm buying a dinosaur of a company to keep it running like a charity? I'm going to fire every single one of those incompetent managers the day the ink is dry. I'm going to automate the whole damn thing and double the profit margin. And there is nothing you can do about it, because once that signature is on the page, I own it." The silence that followed was deafening. Damon stood there, breathing heavy, his chest heaving. He looked around the room. His lawyers had their heads in their hands. Sarah slowly closed her portfolio. She looked at Farouk. Farouk reached up and adjusted his lapel. "Thank you, Damon. That was very clear." "What?" Damon frowned. "What are you doing?" Farouk pulled a small black device from his pocket, a recorder that had been synced to the wire. He pressed a button. Damon's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. "I'm going to fire every single one of those incompetent managers the day the ink is dry. I'm going to automate the whole damn thing." Damon's face went the color of ash. He slumped back into his chair. This is illegal," Damon stammered. "You can't record me. This is entrapment." "Actually," Sarah said, standing up, "New York is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation consents to the recording, it is perfectly legal. And Mr. Al-Fayed consented." Sarah walked to the head of the table. She looked down at the billionaire who had called her dirt. "It seems, Mr. Sterling," she said quietly, "that the peasants have decided to take back the playground." Farouk stood up. "The deal is off, Damon. And per the bad faith clause in the preliminary agreement, which my lawyers are filing a motion on right now, we will be suing you for the breach, and we will be releasing this recording to the press and to your board of directors." Damon looked at them, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. His empire was cracking. His stock was about to tank. His reputation was about to be incinerated. "You can't do this," he whispered. "It's already done," Sarah said. She turned to Farouk. "Shall we go, sir? I believe there is a better place to get lunch, perhaps somewhere with bread that is actually warm." Farouk laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh. "Lead the way, Sarah." They walked out of the boardroom, leaving Damon Sterling sitting alone at his massive table, surrounded by silence and the impending ruins of his own arrogance. The elevator ride down from the 50th floor was silent, but it was the silence of victory, not tension. As the doors opened to the lobby, the chaos that awaited them was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. News of the failed talks had already leaked, likely from a nervous board member who had been watching the live feed of the meeting. The reporters were practically climbing over each other. When Farouk Al-Fayed stepped out, he didn't run. He walked to the nearest bank of microphones, Sarah standing stoically at his right hand. "Mr. Al-Fayed," a reporter from CNBC shouted, "is it true the deal is off? What happened?" Farouk adjusted the microphone. "The deal is terminated," he announced, his voice booming through the lobby. "Sterling Dynamics, under the leadership of Damon Sterling, has demonstrated a fundamental lack of integrity. We have evidence of bad faith negotiations, fraud, and intent to deceive shareholders. My legal team is filing the necessary briefs as we speak." "Fraud?" another reporter gasped. "What kind of evidence?" Farouk smiled and looked at Sarah. "My associate, Ms. Jenkins, will be distributing a press release shortly. It contains a transcript of a recording made legally in the boardroom this morning. I suggest you all read it carefully. It details Mr. Sterling's true feelings about his workforce and his investors." The flashbulbs erupted like a supernova. Sarah felt a strange sense of calm. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was the architect of justice. By the time they reached the Mercedes, the stock ticker on the giant screen in Times Square showed Sterling Dynamics, SDY, plummeting. It had dropped 12% in 10 minutes. Trading was halted shortly after. 2 hours later, Sarah returned to Queens, but this time the black Mercedes waited for her. She walked up the 4 flights of stairs. Her legs didn't ache. She didn't feel tired. She felt electric. She unlocked her door and saw the eviction notice still taped to the inside. She ripped it off. The sound of the tearing paper, incredibly satisfying. She grabbed her suitcase, the one she hadn't unpacked since moving here because she never felt settled, and started throwing her few belongings inside. There was a heavy pounding on the door. It was Mr. Kowalski. "Open up, Jenkins," he shouted. "I saw you come in. Do you have the money or are you leaving?" Sarah zipped up her bag. She walked to the door and flung it open. Mr. Kowalski stood there, a large, angry man in a stained tank top. He blinked, surprised to see Sarah in a $2,000 suit, looking like she just walked off a runway. "I'm leaving, Mr. Kowalski," Sarah said coolly. "Good," he grunted, eyeing her suit suspiciously. "But you still owe me for the month. Plus late fees. That's $1,600. I'm not letting you walk out with that bag until I get cash." Sarah reached into her purse. She pulled out the envelope Farouk had given her earlier, an advance on her first month's salary as his official consultant. She pulled out a stack of $100 bills. She counted out 16, then she added 4 more. "Here is 2,000, she said, slapping the bills into his calloused hand. "Keep the change. Consider it a tip for the excellent hospitality." She walked past him, her suitcase wheels clicking rhythmically on the hallway floor. Mr. Kowalski stood there, mouth agape, holding the cash as she descended the stairs, never looking back. The gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art was the event of the season. The theme was Global Unity, celebrating international trade and cultural exchange. Sarah Jenkins stood by the Temple of Denda, holding a glass of sparkling water. She wore a gown of emerald silk that matched her eyes. She wasn't serving the drinks tonight. She was the guest of honor. "Ms. Jenkins," a voice came from behind her. She turned to see a man she recognized from the news, though he looked very different now. It was the younger lawyer who had been with Damon Sterling that fateful night. "It's good to see you," he said, looking humble. "I just wanted to say, congratulations. The Al Fayed expansion into Europe is all anyone talks about on Wall Street. You've done incredible work as their Director of International Relations." "Thank you," Sarah said politely. "How is Mr. Sterling?" The lawyer grimaced. "Not good. The board voted him out 3 days after the recording leaked. The SEC investigation is still ongoing regarding the false intent filings. He's currently selling his Hamptons estate to pay legal fees. He's a pariah." "Karma has a way of balancing the books," Sarah said softly. "Indeed," the lawyer nodded. "By the way, I saw the news about your father, the posthumous pardon and the restoration of his pension. That was impressive legal work." Sarah smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. That was the real victory. With Farouk's resources and her own determination, she had unearthed the documents that proved her father had been a scapegoat for a corrupt senator. His name was clear. The Jenkins legacy was restored. It wasn't just legal work, Sarah said. It was the truth. It just needed to be translated into a language people couldn't ignore. Just then, Farouk Al-Fayed approached, looking dapper in a tuxedo. "Sarah," he said warmly, "the ambassador of Morocco is asking for you. He needs someone who understands the nuances of the new trade agreement, and apparently his translator is stuck in traffic." Sarah set her glass down on a passing tray, flashing a kind smile at the waiter who carried it, remembering exactly how heavy that tray felt. "Don't worry," Sarah said to Farouk, smoothing her dress. "I speak the language." She walked into the crowd, head held high, no longer invisible, no longer silent. She was Sarah Jenkins, and she had proven to the world that dignity is the one currency that never devalues. What a journey. Sarah's story is a powerful reminder that we should never judge someone by their current circumstances. Damon Sterling thought his money made him untouchable, and he thought Sarah's uniform made her invisible. He learned the hard way that true power isn't about what you own. It's about what you know and how you treat people. Sarah turned her greatest struggle into her greatest victory, using the very skills she was mocked for to topple a giant and restore her family's honor. It just goes to show, be careful who you step on, because they might just be the person who holds the keys to your future. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Have you ever been underestimated by someone in power? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss another dramatic tale. Thanks for watching.